Hello, everyone. I am Danielle Draper, a project manager at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Welcome to our virtual event, The Evolution of Digital Literacy in the Age of AI. We are all here today to talk about the rise of artificial intelligence and the growing need to equip the public with AI knowledge in today's technologically advanced world. The Bipartisan Policy Center is dedicated to contributing resources and scaling ongoing efforts to educate policymakers and society on the basics of AI. Today, I am joined by top experts who also work vigorously to prepare students, families, workers, businesses, and policymakers for an AI-driven world. Let me introduce them. Pamela Gupta, Chief Executive Officer at Trusted AI. Ariel Fox Johnson, Senior Advisor at Common Sense Media. Christian Pinedo, Chief of Staff at the AI Education Project. And Pat Young-Pradit, Chief Academic Officer at Code.org. So thank you all so much for joining us. Before I ask our first question, I want to let the audience know that you can ask questions by using the live chat function on YouTube. So please enter your questions there. All right. So without further ado, today we stand at the cusp of a transformative era in human history, one shaped profoundly by the rapid rise of artificial intelligence. But people tend to fear what they do not understand, and data should suggest that many Americans report feeling more concerned than excited about AI. So to the group, whoever wants to go first, why do you think more people are concerned than excited about AI today?
I can take a first stab at that. I think, as you mentioned out, rightfully so, that uncertainty causes fear and sometimes reluctance to adopt. And there is a lot of complexity when it comes to AI. So I think that is a formidable barrier that we can resolve through education and awareness.
Anyone else want to jump, Pat?
Yeah, I'll hop in. I mean, the question was, why is there more fear than, I don't know, I guess positive feelings? And well, I think it's the media, and specifically movies and books even. AI is not often actually I'm trying hard to think of like a completely positive AI like movie or TV show, and they're probably the most frequent portrayal of AI is taking over our world and killing lots of humans. That's so if you couple that with what Pam was just talking about in terms of a lack of AI literacy, you get people just obviously going to what they know, which is what they see in the movies. Even if they know that's not exactly true, they're not really given a different narrative. And so that's why a lot of the organizations here, Common Sense Media, AI Trusted AI, and a whole bunch of other organizations are really trying to promote AI literacy. And I guess that's why we're all here together, because even policymakers need AI literacy, especially if they're going to be making decisions for the rest of the public.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna say I mean, media's had a jump on us, right? Like we've been doing a lot of this work for maybe 10 years now, but we've seen AI depicted in media for decades now, whether it's in books from the 40s or the 50s or movies coming out of the 70s and 80s. And a lot of our work isn't necessarily to say AI is good and like everything that you see in media is wrong, but there's a lot of context that goes into that. A lot of these decisions need to be made informed by like both positive possibilities of technology, but also like the downsides of it as well. I'll also say like I think a big factor is just the rate of change. This like throughout history, we've seen a lot of technological advancements. I think AI is one of the most quickly approaching advancements that we've had, and for a large majority of the people, it's kind of popped out of nowhere in the last couple of years. And this rate of change is a little bit unsettling. I think it's a lot of there every almost 3 months now, we get some sort of thing that pushes the envelope in terms of what AI is capable of. And I think this is a little bit unnerving. And so the sense of concern around the technologies, I think is warranted. But I hope that it's like a concerned and yet inquisitive feeling.
And I was just going to share, and I think, this is according to some polling data done last year, so it's probably different this year given what Christian was saying about rates of change. But we also see different levels of adoption and experiences with AI, and like particularly thinking about generative AI and things like ChatGPT. When Common Sense talks to kids and parents, last year only a third of parents had used ChatGPT, but twice as many, almost 60% of teenagers had. And half of students had used it for school, but only a quarter of their parents knew that. So there's sort of a disconnect between what different groups are experiencing and levels of familiarity with technology, that can also lead to some uncertainty and unease for people.
I definitely agree with everybody that diminishing fears around AI technology starts with strengthening AI literacy. And so I think before we dive deeper into AI literacy, we should all make sure we're on the same page. Christian, I was wondering if you could define AI literacy. What is it?
Big question. Yeah. I think like AI literacy is, for me, it's the culmination of a lot of things that we've been working on throughout education, right? We've over the past several years, we've been talking about digital media literacy, information literacy, data literacy. Like there's a lot of similar skills that we've been developing throughout education. So broadly, I would say AI literacy is just like the collection of those skills, the knowledge that a person needs to understand, use, critically evaluate AI. I think a person who is AI literate should have the ability to use AI to function effectively in modern society. You have to understand the impact of the technology. You have to be able to make informed decisions. And so if you want to leverage AI to achieve your goals, you should be able to. And so this has implications in terms of their work in their career, their personal lives as digital citizens, as creators and as consumers of information. I think people, for the most part, need to be informed about the impacts of the technology in terms of how it can affect society at large.
Do we all agree? Yes.
I just
I-
want to,
Oh, Pamela, yeah.
I just want to add that, I come from I'm an entrepreneur, I'm coming from business world. And I think there is a lot of talk about, jobs are at stake, that AI will take jobs. And I think it is extremely important for us to define AI literacy from that perspective as to what is one supposed to do to learn the skills necessary that will actually help you leverage AI and augment your capabilities as opposed to replacing. So I think that's a very important aspect of AI literacy as well. So to understand that, we can work with AI systems and really go further and not lose to it, for example.
Agreed. What do you guys think are some key, Pat, I can turn this to you. What are some key terms or key concepts that should be included in an artificial intelligence curriculum to improve AI literacy?
Yeah, well, this list is not going to be comprehensive, number one. So if there are any curriculum designers listen to this, don't just start rattling off. I mean, you're writing down everything write it down, but it's not going to be comprehensive. And second, I'm actually gonna go back in time to the 2016 election, and I remember hearing about Hillary Clinton's email servers, and that was a very big deal, and it probably swayed the fiasco around that probably swayed a lot of people. But what I think happened is that a lot of people didn't actually understand what a server or a computer server actually was. And because they didn't understand what it was, they couldn't understand really like how serious or not serious a deal it was. And it potentially swayed a lot of votes because it came in maybe just, gosh, a month before the election happened. In the same way, we as a society need to understand what a large language model is. We need to understand a definition of AI, but also understand that it's a super broad and vague definition. And so understand more specific examples of AI, whether it's predictive AI or generative AI, et cetera. We should probably understand what machine learning is, because machine learning is actually not too hard to understand in terms of a definition. It's pretty hard to understand in terms of like implementation of it, but most people don't need to understand that anyway. And so these terms are important because they are terms that have ethical and social implications, whether it's ethics, bias, misinformation, academic integrity or dishonesty, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you build upon a basic level of understanding of like these key, yes, technical terms, you can then have a deeper understanding of the social and ethical implications that come and arise from these, technical things. For example, if someone really understands how an LLM works, they'll also understand that it's not a fact machine, and that and to basically take the output with multiple grains of salt. But people who don't know what a generative AI is or what a large language model actually is, think of it as probably like a search engine, and view the outputs in a similar way, and that's a problem.
Did he miss anything that you guys want to add?
No one's saying neural network. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Actually, I do wonder, do people need to know about what a neural network is? I mean, I think it's cool. If you're a computer science student, you should know what a neural network is. But do normal people need to know what a neural network is? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I would just add to that that there are different levels of dimensions of when it comes to AI literacy, and I completely agree that there is not even clarity amongst those who are using it, who are deploying it, who are building it, in terms of, that there is predictive AI and then there's generative AI. And there is a significant difference when it comes to the threats and the risks and the value and the impact, right? And the more clear we are about that, the better we can adopt it for the right purpose. So generative AI is the very fact that it can generate new content is very different from the AI that was prevalent for the last, I don't know, 20 years, for example, right? Predictive AI. So yes, I mean, yeah, we can throw in neural networks because that did change, deep learning did change the very nature of AI. But coming back and pulling back a bit, I think it's really to lay out what is AI and how it impacts different facets of society is really important in terms of not only knowing what we can do with it, but also to minimize the risk. So yes, generative AI, completely different risk model than, and security model and trust model than predictive AI. And when should we use it? When should we not use it? That's one thing. And there's a really important element that also is worth mentioning, which is the intangible and the pervasive use of the technology, which may not be even adopted by choice, for example, right? Whether it is, so I'll just stop there because my phone is ringing, but I just want to make the point that there are elements that we may not even have choice about.
Definitely agree. Um, a lot of people have taken a computer class in their life. I remember I took mine in elementary school, and today using our cell phones or navigating the internet feels second nature to many of us. Could one of you explain what is digital literacy, and do you see it as AI literacy an extension of digital literacy? Are they interrelated? Are there differences?
I mean,
Ariel.
Sure, I can start with that. From the, common sense's perspective, common sense has been teaching digital literacy and what we call sort of digital citizenship and digital well-being for a long time. And it helps young people know how to navigate technology, how to be safe online, smart online, how to be effective online. We see AI literacy as part and parcel of this digital literacy. We think, like with any kind of technology literacy, you should be focused on helping kids understand what AI is, how it works, what its potential impacts are, sort of good and bad, helping kids be able to think critically about different AI tools and how to use them, when they should use them, how to process and form opinions and perspectives on content that may come out of AI, just like we want them to form opinions and perspectives and be able to critically think about other things they may come across in technology. So for common sense, it is sort of a part of digital literacy generally, and like we've added it to our curriculum.
Yeah, social media is arguably one of the most common applications of AI.
Yeah.
Can you explain how AI shapes what we see online and the risks and how it can be misused?
Sure, and I think it's really great that we had the sort of grounding earlier, some different types of AI. For a long time, AI in the form of sort of predictive recommendation algorithms has been used to recommend what content we see, your social media feed, friend suggestions, things based on like what you are expected to like or engage with. This is a good thing in the sense of it gives people content they want to consume. People spend more time interacting on sites and services. There are also the flip side of that. It can be negative. You could spend too much time. Children and young people especially can get kind of hooked on this stuff. It can also lead to polarization and filter bubbles, perpetuate bias, undermine choices and creativity for people. More recently, with the rise of the generative AI, you can use AI to, as people are saying, develop the actual content that you will be seeing online. So it's not just predicting that you should see this and then a person has to go create that post, but now AI can also create that post or that video. This makes it much more easy to create effective dis and misinformation campaigns, sort of ramifications for democracy and politics. It also can have ramifications for how bullying occurs in schools. And we see a lot of problems with like teens and deep fakes, or, having your principal say something or appear to say something ridiculous on video. So there can be a lot of new risks and harms now. I think, that could go on for days talking about this. But one more thing that I wanted to make sure to mention is associated privacy risks and harms with AI. People have been talking about large language models and AI training data, and AI models need a lot of data on which to train. This is yet another way that we contribute to sort of surveillance and information collection about young people and about our society at large. So that's something to keep in mind with AI. And now a new risk when we're generating content with AI is also that these models can turn around and disclose personal or other sensitive information inadvertently or advertently in response to different prompts or questions.
Great. Yeah, I definitely see AI literacy as a vital aspect of online safety, given the ethical concerns that you just mentioned, data privacy, bias, surveillance, misinformation. So do you all see that AI literacy programs can prepare students to be aware of these issues? And could one of you explain why AI literacy initiatives should target students, and younger people specifically?
I think all of us could probably give reasons. So I'll name one and we'll play a game. And then I'm gonna pick someone at random so that you all can stay on your toes here, and then you'll give another reason too. I will say because as adults, we're able to use these flawed AI tools productively because we're adults and we've gone through the learning process, and we've built up enough experience to evaluate outputs and base them and weigh them against what we know as fact and reality. Whereas kids, even kids as young as 13, which are really the youngest kids that should be using a lot of these chatbots, they haven't built up the evaluation processes nor the experience. Therefore, we need to, as adults and teachers, we need to proactively teach them how to assess these things, because nowhere, at no time in the world has there been such ease in disseminating false information, especially for young students. So that's one reason. I'm going to go with Christian.
Sure. I'll also say, I think education and teachers are like the experts poised to do this work already. Education has been talking about like building skills in communication and problem solving and information literacy, creativity, like computational thinking, critical thinking. We've been talking about these skills and how to develop them amongst students for decades now. They've all gone through different names. We've called them durable skills, 21st century skills, life skills. And I think they're all extremely prevalent and necessary, even in the context of AI. And so programs targeting students and targeting them via K-12 education systems, I think is super apt, because this isn't new to a lot of teachers. It just maybe is a little bit recontextualized. I'm gonna continue Pat's game, and I'll popcorn it over to Ariel.
Sure. I guess, one thing I would say to add on, because I think, Pat really touched on how children and teens can be uniquely vulnerable to sort of misinformation or not have the skills to critically assess. And I think schools are amazing places to do this. As Christian said, we know that young people are early adopters of new technology, and they, there are obviously lots of different barriers, and different groups can have different access pain points and struggles. But in general, we know that there's sort of less fear in trying something new when you're younger, and we see that young people are trying AI at higher rates right now than, for example, their parents. And I will popcorn to Pamela since she's.
Yeah, I think it's, I would just point out that there are various dimensions when it comes to AI and teaching, which affect what would be the right material for students to understand, which ranges, when it comes to AI, it ranges from adoption and being comfortable that this is, machine generated, for example, content, to cognitive dimensions, right? That understanding that what are the fundamental concepts of AI? What are various algorithms? For the longest time, when we're looking at AI, we're looking at expert systems, for example, in the beginning, which were, you had experts creating kind of a if then else, and also an expert system based on what the knowledge was and how to tap into that. But now we're talking about various algorithms, right? So there is that cognitive dimension for them to understand that there is a fundamental difference in how these systems learn information and what they can produce. That's extremely, I think, important to understand that this is not a given, right? This is a way our system is functioning. and then there is, then, not to throw too many terms around, but looking into some of the studies that OECD has, for example, or other institutions have come out with as to what should be transmitted to, in be part of that AI literacy. It is things such as metacognitive, affective, extremely important to focus in on the social aspect as well, which is what are the societal impacts of AI? And the very fact that our perception is reality and our perception is based on some of these systems as we are developing them, it is shaping our reality. So it's very important to know what is reality and how it is being shaped by AI, and to be able to demarcate that, right? To know what is fact, what is reality, and what is not, what is fancy then, in that way, in other words. But I think the main takeaway from that point I want to make is that very important, whether, and we are, I think, all learners, right? There is so much that is being introduced through AI, which never did exist. It's unprecedented. So in a one dimension or one aspect, we are all learners, right? So even if we are the older and the hopefully wiser part of the demographic, right, there is a lot to be learned. And I do want to talk a little bit maybe later about maybe a role-based learning, something that we do in the business world, or when we're talking about education, based on what your role is. If you're a developer, it's something you need to know which is unique to your role. If you're a student, what is unique to your role? If you're a business person who's deploying technology, what is important for you to know about this technology? If you're a consumer, what do you need to know? So I think we are, at the end of the day, we are all learning what can be done and what can be the impact of this technology, and especially the younger, demographic, and for them to understand that this is not all, it may not all be reality, right? There's hallucinations, for example, when we talk about generative AI. So you really have to have that persona and that lens of everything you're reading or everything you're generating now may not exactly be factual, and to have that mindset. So I think there's a lot to be learned here. So we do have a big task ahead of us.
Definitely. And thanks, Pat, for your fun game. Going back to Pat or Christian, you work in education. How do we ensure teachers are properly trained to educate our youth on AI?
Christian, this is what y'all do. Go at it.
Yeah, I would say this is a big undertaking because, like, a couple of things. One, I think teachers often are like the on the front lines, so to speak, in terms of what this looks like in terms of change. They're dealing with students day to day, and students are often, as we talked about earlier, often like these first adopters. They're the ones who do not have the potential to be impacted by this, but they already are actively being impacted by this. And teachers are likely seeing that across the country. And so a lot of work that we do is coming into these spaces and hearing and learning from teachers firsthand in terms of what they see their students doing, the questions that the students are asking, and the questions that teachers have themselves. And so part of it is like, as teachers are often shepherds of this kind of change, is kind of critical thinking towards technology for students. And in the context of classrooms, this technology also just has the capacity to make teaching a little bit easier. We're at a stage in education right now where we're still grappling with learning loss that was experienced during COVID. We're still grappling with teacher shortages and absenteeism among students across the country. And so AI also just has the capacity to build tools that can level that playing field a little bit and make it a little bit easier as a teacher to do their work effectively. And so I think there's two dimensions to this. Like, one is, how can a teacher actually build those muscles? What are the red flags and the green flags that I should be aware of when I look at AI tools? We're also at the stage right now where a lot of companies are building privately these ed tech tools and marketing them towards teachers, and teachers are essentially being the critical consumer in this case. In terms of if I should use this tool in my classroom or for my work, here are the measures I need to make sure I take in order to make sure that it's responsible. And so one dimension is like tool use for actually making teaching a little bit more effective and easier for all of the teachers across the country. That second dimension is actually like, okay, beyond the tools themselves, what kind of critical thinking skills, what kind of awareness should I be building among my students? So that way, when they are online, when they are on social media, they are aware of the potential risk of AI generated content. They're aware of the societal impact of this technology in ways that are maybe a little bit more invisible. Students already talk about the quote unquote all-knowing algorithm that controls what they see on social media. That's a little bit more visible, but what about the things that are a little bit more underlying? As the technology becomes more and more ubiquitous, I think building those critical thinking skills is going to be important. And so those two dimensions, I think, are the two primary ones that we try and work with teachers across the country.
And I'll add, because I know that a lot of people viewing this live and recorded are probably connected to policy somehow, since this is the Bipartisan Policy Center, right? And I will say, if you're a policymaker, you need to fund what Christian was just talking about, which means funding professional development that promotes AI literacy. And so Teach AI is an initiative led by Code.org, ETS, ISTE, Khan Academy, and the World Economic Forum. We have many groups that are part of the advisory committee, including AI EDU and Common Sense Media. We put out these policy resources about 3 weeks ago, and you can find them at teachai.org/policy. One of the policy recommendations is to fund AI literacy PD. And that's under the term build capacity. And actually at the federal level, there's an act right now that was introduced several months ago, in fact, by Representative Blunt Rochester and Representative Bouchon, so it's bipartisan. And they're calling for an amendment to the Digital Equity Act that would codify AI literacy as part of digital literacy, Danielle, what you talked about earlier, and would make existing funds available for AI literacy efforts. And they actually define AI literacy in that act, and it actually, lo and behold, really aligns to what we've been talking about so far. It includes the use of AI and also understanding how AI works.
Yeah, I'm happy to transition to the policy discussion. And I think right before we transition to the government's role in all of this, Pamela, could you explain how public awareness and understanding of artificial intelligence is vital aspects of national security, cyber security, workforce preparedness, and online safety?
Yeah, that's a that's a pretty big question.
Yeah, that's
Let
true.
me see. Let me see what's a good starting point for that. I think in terms of the risks involved, there are so many unique aspects that AI brings to the table that will impact those who are creating it, those who are deploying it, and those who are using it. And that really envelopes everyone, right? It is envelopes the consumers, the business, and the policymakers and the government. So whether it's at a national level or at an individual level, there are risks that are not well understood or highlighted. And definitely as regulations, we are not approaching them holistically. So I wouldn't say that the EU AI Act approaches it holistically, or the blueprint, the executive order. I feel what we need is a very realistic look at what is unique to the risk that AI poses. And those are very contextual, but let me just start out with 5 years ago, I had created a framework called AI Tips, Trust Integrated Pillars for Sustainability, and resting on 8 essential pillars. Now, you might ask, coming from a cybersecurity background and creating strategic cybersecurity initiatives for large Fortune 550, why did I go into this essential pillars of trustworthiness? There is a reason, one of them being security stands on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And as I started to take a look at how do we secure AI, I realized because of the very nature of AI, you're not going to be able to secure AI just with protecting, for example, the confidentiality of the information, making it accessible on a need-to-know basis, for example, etc. So I started taking a look, and I defined 8 pillars of trustworthiness, starting with security and privacy. And those are the foundation. There is really no room for interpretation on that. But then there are the risks that are very unique to AI. And in order to really get the value of AI, we have to address the risks. And those risks are, in addition to security, privacy, the other 6 pillars are transparency, explainability. Why is an algorithm coming out with an output? Without that, we really cannot trust it. Auditability. Audit is going to be very different for these systems than for mainstay systems that we have in place and the process. Regulations, bias, and last but not least, accountability. At the end of the day, who is accountable for the decisions a system is making? So all those play a very important role. And depending on the context, we can wait it out. We may not need privacy for a system that is functioning, that has no private data collected. But we may have to have a lot of emphasis that it is accountable and explainable. So what I want to highlight is there are risks that we are carrying from conventional systems, such as cybersecurity, right? However, it's going to be different for AI systems. And then risks that are to AI systems that we have to address before we can trust that the systems are resilient, they're making the decisions the way we are expecting them to. Because after all, the whole purpose in my mind is I'm a big believer in the value that we can gather from AI systems and that we can produce. And the only way we can do that is if we have addressed the risk based on the context, based on what they're supposed to be doing, and have a good control over it. So I hope that gives a kind of a foundation of what you asked for.
Definitely. Ariel, do you see any policies that can be put into place to address what Pamela was just talking about?
I mean, I think I would emphasize what's been mentioned before in terms of roles for government include supporting funding, both funding curriculums and funding train the trainers, teach the teachers, professional development, things like that. I also think that to some of Pamela's points, we need to create guardrails, different guardrails for different technology, but government can create guardrails in terms of, making sure things that happen using AI aren't somehow outside of the law, making sure that when companies are developing or deploying AI systems, that they have done certain risk assessments and considerations of ways their technology might be used or misused in their minds to impact different people and different groups involving lots of diverse stakeholders and coming up with those assessments and critically thinking about them, making sure that we have privacy protections for AI. There are lots of different ways that we can start to put in place guardrails for AI, and government can do that, and government can also help with funding. I do want to flag that companies can do a lot of the guardrail development themselves if they so choose. They don't need to wait for government. So by common sense, we would always encourage them to lead the way and not always wait for policymakers. Unfortunately, you know, as we've seen, oftentimes it does take policymakers, and if you're listening now, it takes you guys to act to start to get the ball rolling.
I will.
Agreed. Oh, go on.
So I'm gonna add one more dimension is like also just research. A lot of the things that Pamela highlighted are things that are still very unknown. Transparency and explainability, especially with large language models, is still something that needs to be worked on in the research world. NSF right now is piloting the National AI Research Resource, or NARE, which is essentially just a resource that educators and researchers can use to access computational power resources to contribute to AI research, because AI is a very expensive technology. We're in a world right now where only the largest tech companies could afford to build and do a lot of testing on these systems. And so building resources for researchers, for educators to dig into a lot of this black box that is AI, to help us answer a lot of these questions that are necessary for us to build the context and the decision-making powers for us to be able to implement the technology responsibly. I think this is a really, really big gap that needs to be closed. And I'm glad that there are some initiatives that exist right now out of the federal government that are helping to close those gaps.
If I were to add to that list of initiatives, so the NARE is great in terms of computational power, but this actually goes back to me talking about machine learning. Okay, so everyone who's listening, if you don't know what machine learning is, I'm going to break it down for you. I apologize if you're an AI engineer and you're going to scoff at my 1-minute description here, but there's computational power. There are the algorithms that you give these computers in order to make relationships among data, and then there's the data. So the more data you have, the more computational power you have. And then like if you have just like a base quality of algorithms, I'm mentioning that because actually algorithmic development hasn't increased at the same level of the same trajectory as computational power and just the amount of data that we can suck in. So that's machine learning, and that's why machines can learn now rather than just take the if-then statements that Pamela was talking about from expert systems, from classical AI. Now with that, you know, Christian was just talking about computational power. Educators need to have, well, education developers, AI edtech developers need to also have quality data. So we can't just pull data from the internet because there's a whole bunch of silliness on the internet that doesn't help with education. Educators need quality data, and that requires you know, data that we don't have right now, that's highly structured, that represents, you know, interactions between teachers and students and outcomes in digital environments, which are really, really hard to get at the level that to train an AI. And so if you're looking, policymakers out there, to fund another kind of bill or something, fund like a data consortium specifically for educational purposes. Because again, education is way different than the use cases for like just general LLMs out there.
Yeah, I like how Ariel, we've talked about schools and policymakers, and then Ariel mentioned the tech companies themselves. So want to turn it over to a YouTube question. Also for our audience, please use the live chat in YouTube to type your questions. So this is from Seth. With major AI advancements and platforms emerging from companies like Google, Oracle, Amazon, OpenAI, what ethical issues arise from publicly traded companies controlling how information is distributed. Anyone want to take that one?
Honestly, I think the ethical issues are not necessarily arising. I think they've been they've existed for decades now. The like tech companies controlling information is not a new concept to us. And so I don't know if I could speak specifically to like new emerging concerns or new emerging things that we should be wary of. I think there's a ton of work already going into transparency, going into regulation, going into making sure that companies are actually leading with advancement from in a more community-based perspective. But I will say like these companies are often like leading the charge in terms of defining the field. Especially in the context of AI, this is still very new. In the context of generative AI, this is very new. This idea of AI assistance, AI kind of embedded systems into things that we're already doing online. This is still kind of emerging, and it feels like every couple of months we get a new industry-leading technology or industry-leading model that changes the field a little bit. And this is probably coming from only like 4 big players. I think being informed in terms of what's contributing to the direction that technology is being pushed in is a really necessary thing. How do we define good technology? How do we define good AI? Is something that's really only being defined by a few. I think listening to a couple of community members, what are the concerns that people are actually having? I know you mentioned at the very beginning of this webinar that the Americans have growing concerns. Like I would love to hear them, and I'd love for those concerns to be voiced to companies that are creating these systems as well.
Great.
I think
Yeah.
just
Oh,
want to add to that a different perspective, which is self-regulation. In order for it to be effective by the industry, has to have some traction, right? In other words, for what we've seen for payment card industry, right? It came out of the credit card industry and they created standards, et cetera. But this is when you're talking about AI regulations and the role that regulations play into creating those guardrails, not roadblocks, but guardrails. It's really important that we have something in place, right? Because self-regulation is not going to be effective. It's going to take a long time to develop, even if it does come out. Let's say the tech giants come out with something, right? But we have so much that is already going in place and has been in place that it is really important to kind of be aware of where the risks are. For example, when I mentioned that, something unique to AI risk is ethical bias, for example. Things, where can that play a role? It's already playing a role in things, in areas such as healthcare, for example. Whether it's race or color, religion, national origin, gender, age, etc. These can play a big role in creating bias in systems that have massive impact on all of society, lending, healthcare, financial. But if we wait for self-regulation, that in my mind is going to be problematic because it's not easy to do. It's going to take a long time and it has to gain traction. But what I'm also not proposing is only relying on regulations. Yes, we do need to take a risk-based approach. And again, we have to kind of, I think, really think outside the box, because there is nothing about AI which lends itself to the known and precedented. So if we're looking at a holistic way to approach the risk, it will involve taking a look at what are the regulations in place, what is the risk based on context and based on industry, et cetera, and how does that affect what is the data that is collected and how is it debiased and how is it made secure and also does not lend itself to privacy issues, etc. A lot of issues, not something that we can do, without having a systemic and a structured approach is what I would say. So yes, we have risk. Then, tech giants, are they posing a separate risk? I would say they're attenuating or accentuating what does exist because of the amount of data that is being generated and how much they have control over when it comes to the data that is generated. And all data, by the way, is not good data and therefore is not usable data for AI. So why is it not good? Because of some of the reasons I mentioned. So I think the larger tech industry does pose a risk, but it's something that is not, again, cannot be self-regulated because it would not be feasible in my view. So.
Could Ariel or Pat, you brought up specific legislation, if you want to give like a state of AI regulation, either like is there state or federal or international legislation that you want to discuss?
Well, I mean, the EU AI Act was kind of touched upon. Again, a lot of people are wondering not just what the EU AI Act says, but what does it say about education? And for those of us outside the EU, what does it mean for us outside the EU? And so Teach AI did write up a memo written by actually our in-house legislative assistant, Nathan Grant. And you can find that EU AI Act memo at teachai.org/policy. In terms of state policy, Danielle, there's a lot of things happening, even though there are a lot of things proposed at the federal level. Nothing's actually been signed, right? But at the state level, there are 12 states now that have provided guidance on AI to their school systems. And guidance is in a way policy, but policy that's like more flexible, instructionally focused. It might not have to go through like super duper formal approval processes. But then there are other states that have like proposed legislation around AI and education task forces. Those are states like Mississippi, California. There are states that are calling for the integration of AI skills and concepts into existing curriculum instruction. Those are Oklahoma, Maryland, Mississippi. There are states that are doing what Christian was talking about in terms of professional development, but funding it at a state level, and that's Oklahoma and Kentucky. And then in terms of supporting innovation, promoting research and development into tools, pedagogy, curriculum, there's one state actually that jumped on that early. They used a lot of ESSER funding to do a lot of AI pilots, and that's Indiana. So that's like a current rundown of like what's happening policy-wise at the state level. And at the federal level, there are a whole bunch of things that are, proposed, but who knows what's going to happen in terms of actually passing them.
Ariel, did you want to jump in there?
I mean, I think Pat has a great, better than me handle on all the stuff happening in the states with AI and education. I would just add that, we're also seeing at the states passing laws with respect to AI generally. I think Colorado in the last week or so just signed into law rules regarding sort of high risk AI systems and requiring sort of considerations of discrimination and assessments on how AI is used. And, I know in California, Common Sense is supporting different AI bills that have to do with CSAM and generated materials, or that have to do with privacy of kids' personal information. That would include students for training AI data. So there's all different ways that states are kind of looking at AI issues and as mentioned, actually passing laws. So that's exciting.
Oh, can I add one more thing? So there are a lot of us here, a lot of other people in the community have been trying to provide a lot of information. That's right. That's what the Bipartisan Policy Center does for federal legislators. And So, on the Senate side, they had their task force and they put out this report, and it mentioned education just a bit, but not really a lot. And in fact, I don't think they had really any kind of education focused forums or hearings. And now there's this House AI task force that is like in the middle of their task force experience. They're going to be putting out a report in October or November. And luckily, they have brought in some education folks. And so we're hoping that, at least on the House AI task force side, there's going to be more attention to education and hopefully some recommendations of policy that is specific to education. But that's the rundown of stuff kind of happening in terms of just like information and legislators talking.
Great. We are starting to wrap up here. Wanted to go around with a final round robin of, so if someone just graduated high school or college and want to learn about AI, where should they go? How do they begin learning about these concepts? So, Christian, you want to start?
The resources are, I think, abound. I think it really, like we talked a little bit earlier in this conversation about like the depth of knowledge required to actually be effective citizens or workforce members or whatever it is. And so I think it really depends on industries that you want to go into. Because I think for the creatives, if you're going to the music industry, AI is impacting that already. And the way that it's impacting that is very different than AI might be impacting computer scientists, data scientists. And so thinking of AI as this like big homogenous concept, I think is a little bit, it's a little bit hard to approach. Rather, I would love to think about people learning about AI as a technology within the specific context that they're interested in. And so for that, there's tons of resources. And I'm a former visual arts teacher. And so I love thinking and talking with creatives and how they're learning about new skills and new concepts that they have to apply to their work as artists in a very AI powered field right now. So maybe like this is a bit of a scapegoat of an answer because I don't think there are specific resources that I would point you to learn about AI. Rather, I'd encourage you not to think of AI as like this one big thing that you have to learn about, but I would try and focus on like where in the context of AI do you want to learn?
Christian's being too humble. I would point people to AI EDU's resources, which are super like accessible. I would point them to Common Sense Media's resources, which again are super accessible and couched within a larger context of digital citizenship. I'll point them to Code.org's resources to get not just deep about the computer sciencey side, but understand like how bias information, misinformation, all that stuff works. I mean, we have this wonderful video of Mira Murati, CTO of OpenAI, talking about how large language models work. That's really cool. So there are actually lots of resources, but I mean, I definitely plus one what Christian said. I mean, we can't paint these broad pictures. If you take away any takeaway from this panel, folks, like don't paint like broad brushes of AI in education. It really depends on like what even subject you're talking about or AI in society. Like it depends on what profession, what sector, et cetera, et cetera. That depends on what AI you're even talking about, because there's not only one. That's what I have to add about that.
Ariel, you want to?
I was just saying it's hard. I'm steeped in the policy space, so I'm sort of thinking about someone interested in policy. I want to like plus 100 to everything Christian and Pat said. In the policy space, the Congressional Research Service has also been putting out good, focused, short reports about AI and different aspects. Like they put out a nice generative AI primer a year ago, things like that. So if that's your space, I think that's a great place to look to.
Pamela?
Yeah, I would just say if you're graduating out of school, Khan Academy has free resources that they've just released for educational institutions, as well as Coursera. There's a lot of good, massively online courses that I have used in order to gain, identify which areas I'm interested in and kind of hone in on that. And of course, all the big names, Harvard, MIT, they're offering a lot of resources for a end-to-end kind of a course, which is free also. So there's no dearth of resources. It's as the others in panel pointed out, it's a question of where do you want to start? What do you want to focus on? Right.
Great. Well, thank you all so much, Christian, Ariel, Pamela, and Pat. Yeah, thank you so much for coming to the Bipartisan Policy Center's webinar on the need for AI literacy in the United States. So thank you all so much. Thanks to our audience. Great.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.